Is it just audio?
There's a new camera.
Oh, somebody do every
started.
Kind of like the point of sale stuff is different every time. It seems like every 6 months it's a new thing to get used to.
Indeed.
Okay, recording started.
All right, good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular monthly meeting of the Transportation Advisory Board. My name is Cynthia Kress. I'm currently serving as chair. Thank you to Julian, who's not here this evening, for covering for me in the June meeting while I was on vacation. Well, let's see. That brings us right to approval of the minutes. I'm seeking approval of the minutes from June rather, by unanimous consent as presented.
I am not actually okay with minutes.
Do you have a suggested adoption?
I think the feedback, questions and feedback under regular business MetroFlex tab, the opposed feedback, I think is kind of missing a couple of the key points that were brought up. Two of those that stood out, we talked about the cost per ride. It wasn't so much the total cost, it was more the cost per ride. I thought that was something we discussed and would be important if anyone were to look at the concerns raised. And then the other part of it was that the service was pitched to close the gap with first mile, last mile, but then there's a lot of discussion about it being point-to point for any points within that zone. And so the concern of whether it was actually targeting what Metro had identified themselves as their gap to usage. So I think that those should be noted.
I would suggest for efficiency, maybe we just don't approve them tonight and you go back and you've got the record, unless there's any discussion about it. I would say you take that back and then we just do July and June in August. Is that acceptable?
Yep.
Okay, thank you for that.
He's not alone. He's not alone. I also would like to chip in some things on the minutes, and that is, there was a decision made, in all due respect to those that were here, because the follow-on discussion that we had was about the SIP and the TIP. And the thing that kept popping out to me was make wise money decisions. And we thought, at least I thought, we were making a wise money decision. Come to find out, as I told you offline, they went back and rebriefed to the committee, council, not committee as a whole, but the committee. And what became clear, because I was there, was they had much more information to put out that we never got in that meeting. So I know that the minutes cannot reflect that, but that's what happened. And so I wholeheartedly agree with Micah that the minutes should reflect all reasons why there was that vote. It seemed to me that the minutes were one-sided toward the folks who were wanting or agreeing to move this forward. And it wasn't the same. So with that said, I feel better now that I had the time to spit that out. And when I saw those minutes is why I went to that other meeting, which was very important because I learned big time much more information that was put out.
Did you change your view after going to that other meeting?
Somewhat, but not totally.
I'm going to ask for a timeout
I know we want to
That's
get,
okay. Let me just, I want to make sure everything gets addressed, but I wanted to do it in the right time and manner. If we could agree that you have a comment you felt wasn't adequately reflected in the minutes, you had a couple things weren't adequately reflected in the minutes. If we could
Yeah, I mean, I had actually, since you brought it up, I did feel the same way. I didn't want to, didn't know if I was going to be the only one, but this really does read as describing the views of the in favor and opposed more positively on one side and more negatively on the other. Pointing, kind of framing stuff as like good mobility opportunities being missed out is, I mean, that's very like a general statement to try and paint a rosy picture about one thing when those that were in favor of this were, I mean, literally was tossed out. Oh, it's just X number of dollars in our total budget. Who cares, right? That's a big difference than being like, oh, it's a minimal cost for the benefit being provided. That's a not understanding how our budget works and how it's, we don't use up all our budget with one purchase. We use it up with lots and lots and lots of little purchases. So yeah, I mean, I'm overall not super happy with how that was written. I'm glad we're making some changes.
Summarize maybe a tone that you felt like it didn't capture so that we can give that feedback and then we can go ahead.
This is probably what you're asking right now. Is I was going to ask how best to give this feedback, whether it's just verbal or written, and who should be the keeper of that.
I want to make sure you feel heard, but I don't want to revisit old territory. As an advisory group, I think we need to be, well, and I have something I want to say about that too, but I want to make sure if you have a way to summarize or if you'd rather propose something.
Well, I mean, I think I have my own bias, right? Because I had my own view, and so I don't think it's fair for me to characterize.
Well, we still have to vote for them. You're
sure.
So we don't like it.
My view, and I wouldn't actually even suggest that this should be what's written down here, but my view is that those that were in favor were very dismissive, maybe even almost to like the point of, well, let's ignore the cost. And those that were in favor thought it's something that needs to be considered within the scope. Yeah, I think that's pretty different. I mean, I was pretty troubled, honestly, by the comment about, oh, it's just X number of dollars. Like, as a taxpayer here, that's concerning, because then when I hear that our city then took it to the next meeting, and I'm wondering, like, well, how did they pitch it, right? To go and try and press this forward when the direction of TAB, and it felt a little bit like those that were opposed were kind of pressing further than we normally go when we make a decision as a group. We know the other side, but there was a comment made to like, well, let's make sure we really capture this because it was 2 against 3 and it was super close. And it's like, we never do that. We capture the vote, but we never really, it felt a little bit like trying to pull it back the direction that we didn't agree to. So I think there's maybe more of a discussion that needs to be had on this than just the minutes.
I think that's what I'm sensing is there's maybe another discussion that we need to have about this. And I would propose that we stick to the minutes for the moment. Let's get through the agenda tonight because it's prepared and there's staff attendees, but I absolutely want to make sure everybody feels satisfied. I also just want to say that I think this is really important material. And I think that the way we walk through this is going to be pretty important. And I think that if we're not having trouble with coming, to agreements, then we're not asking hard enough questions. And so I obviously was there, I was on vacation, but I feel like that's a sign to me that we're getting to some more substantive information that an advisory group is well suited to deliver. And at the end, I think there is some benefit to asking people to vote because I think it kind of gives people an opportunity to try to convince each other. It's not just general feedback that we can kind of pretend doesn't conflict with each other, like we actually have to come to do something. And so I don't think we should be afraid to do that. But at the end of the day, of course, we're an advisory board, and we give our advice, we make sure we're heard, and then the decision makers have the benefit of that discourse. And I think that protecting the discourse is as the chair, that my number one goal. So I do want to move on, but I do want to revisit this. I'm not sure how. I'll probably maybe talk to a couple people, including staff, and try to figure out, how to do that appropriately. But I want to make sure that people feel heard and that they feel that they should not bring things up because they think they're going to be dismissed. As an advisory group, we might make advice that never gets implemented, but that's that may so be it, but it's still, none of us wants to keep showing up if we're not getting heard and if we're not getting to the meat. And so I would like to propose that would you be okay if we move along, and then we revisit this?
Point of order. Robert's Rules of Order does allow us to table anything that's not clear for us right now, so we can table the approval of those
I'm
minutes
suggesting
till
we
next.
table these till next.
I move that we table them.
Second.
Do we have to vote on that? All in favor? We all are tabling them. Great. Okay. I think it's an important discussion, and I think we need to be patient with each other and see it all the way through, because we want to create an environment where people can disagree, because that's where the best work comes from, in my opinion. Well, that's awesome. It's the first time I didn't get to the second half of this. It says hearing no objections. Only a few. What did I do with my day? Okay, so that brings us to public comment. Do we have anyone online making public comment? I don't see anyone in the room.
We do not know.
Okay. The weather's too nice. I'm sorry? The weather's too nice, yeah. Suddenly the city's running just fine. Okay, well, that brings us to regular business, and we're going to talk about the ADA transition plan. And it looks like Ms. Dale Markey Crimp is going to, shall I turn it to you or to John? Okay.
You can go ahead and turn it to me. I'm going to join this meeting and get the slide deck up there. Okay, that should be taken care of. Turn off the camera. We'll go ahead and share. Oh, it just takes a hot second every time to find out where I need to be. There we go. Good evening. My name is Dale Markey Crimp. I'm the performance analyst for the city of Issaquah and the acting ADA transition plan manager. Title I borrowed from John Mortensen about 6 months ago, and I'm holding on to it for a little bit. And it's a joy to be here tonight with all of you to talk a bit about our ADA transition plan and where it currently is at. The purpose of our time together tonight is for me to share an update on the ADA transition plan, the progress we've made, and then also to gather input specifically on the current prioritization framework, what we're using to determine what are the ADA barriers that we want to remove sooner rather than later, and what are the ADA barriers that we might remove later rather than sooner. To do this, though, I'm going to give a little bit of a background exploration on the ADA and transition plans in general. And I know you've seen these slides in the memo, but we'll walk through it. And the lucky thing is that we've got the expert in the room here across the table from me. So specifically tonight, I'm hoping to get feedback on the current framework. And then time permitting, I'd also love to get your thoughts, excuse me, on how we may communicate the progress we make on the implementation of the plan as outlined, sort of what might be the most relevant and effective way to communicate that progress. But before we get into the plan, I'm going to provide a little bit of background on the ADA itself and how we come to be in this particular moment. And so the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, while originally passed in 1990, was preceded by the Rehabilitation Act in 1973. And then the ADA was updated in 2010. The city of Issaquah in 2014 undertook a previous ADA transition plan. However, that plan maybe hasn't been used to guide as much of our barrier removal as it was originally intended. More recently, there was an update to how pass-through funding from the federal government would come to the city that requires an up-to-date ADA transition plan be in place. And so we are currently working on finalizing an ADA transition plan so that we can have it available to inform the work that we do, but also so that we can be in legal compliance with the funding for transportation improvement projects across the city that comes through WashDOT. A little bit about the plan itself. What is an ADA transition plan? I certainly did not know when I took on this project. An ADA transition plan should identify the current accessibility barriers across the city, whether those are physical barriers or programmatic barriers. It should describe the potential methods for removing those barriers. We know some barriers might be removed, as a single thing. We're going to go and fix that piece of sidewalk that has a high edge that people are tripping over. It also might be removed as part of a broader project that reimagines that entire stretch of road. And so the plan should outline some of the potential ways the city might remove each barrier. It should provide a schedule for removing barriers. So what's going to happen in the next 6 years, what's going to happen after those 6 years. And so not only when we would expect the improvements to be made or the barriers to be removed, but also the dollars that we'll need to commit to being able to remove those barriers. And then lastly, it should identify the public official, the person here at the city of Issaquah that's responsible for implementing that barrier removal or that improvement. You can see I've got on the right-hand side of this slide in particular, just outlining some of the physical barriers and programmatic barriers that are captured within this plan. Given the expertise and interests of this group, we're going to focus tonight just on public right-of-way, but I'll talk about next steps and a chance to learn about the other chapters. It is currently about a 200-page document, so I thought I'd keep it light for us and just focus on public right-of-way for tonight. But you can see this plan will also involve city buildings. It will also involve parks and trails. And then it will also take a look at the programmatic elements that might be prohibiting some people from fully accessing everything the city has to offer, whether that be our recreation programs, the accessibility of our website, the accessibility of our public meetings and how they're designed, all fall under the umbrella of this transition plan. I want to give some examples. When we talk about public right-of-way in the ADA, what are we talking about? This might be like bread and butter for this group, but I didn't want to make any assumptions. So when we're talking about ADA compliant features in the public right-of-way, we're talking about curb ramps, we're talking about blended transitions, and I want to show some examples of some others. So sidewalks and pedestrian signals, and those are the big ones, along with handicap or accessible parking spaces that make up the public right-of-way section of this plan. Now, let's look at some of what these things look like when they are non-compliant, because that's what we're really talking about. We're talking about removing the barriers. So these are, I'll go back. These are all good examples. This is like, good job, Issaquah. That is a good looking curb ramp right there. That is a good looking sidewalk right there. Woo! They don't all look that way. So some examples of some non-compliant curb ramps. So I went on a walk this afternoon and just sort of, also, these are not my photos, but I was looking around to see like, okay, where are we in the green? Where are we in the fair or the better? So you'll notice, oh gosh, it's leaving my brain, but the truncated domes, is that, hey, that yellow, what I would call a yellow rumble strip in my own personal linguistics, the truncated domes in that fair or better. Then you can see this poor transition. You'll notice that has this sort of outdated, I believe it's diamond aggregate transition. Am I doing well, transportation people?
Great.
A generalist who's learned some things. Then we have an example here of a very poor curb ramp. So you can see not only is it, doesn't even have the diamond aggregate that's outdated, but it's also really narrow. Like I would be surprised if a wheelchair or something on wheels could make it through there. And then we have one in the entire city one missing transition right there. So you can see it's really unclear when it becomes road from sidewalk. Also, there we go, compliant truncated domes. Seeing next to that, so on the far left, we've got a fully compliant curb ramp. And then you can look and see some outdated or some non-existent warning surfaces. Also, this won't come as a surprise, I don't think, but sidewalks. So our big issue with non-compliant sidewalks has to do with cracks or upheavals. And I'll show some maps in a moment about where most of these are happening. And then push buttons. So push buttons with non-accessible features, things that aren't necessarily, the push button is there, but it's not necessarily ADA compliant push button.
Is the difference for the push button the one that has the raised arrow so you can feel which direction it's pointing?
It's got an arrow for that, and then if you push the newer ones and you hold it for a few seconds, it'll start talking to you.
Oh.
It'll say, wait to cross Southeast 56th at East Lake Sammamish Parkway.
It'll talk, it'll vibrate. It gives sort of a multi-sensory feedback to the user. So if you've got multiple ways to know when it's safe to go.
Just a quick comment. The old aggregate, for some of us who are older, that was a step up from nothing to the old aggregate.
Absolutely.
Now this is another step up. We've got to realize that in those days with the old aggregate, that wasn't a bad thing. That was a good move, but we now see it wasn't good enough.
Absolutely.
And now we got the same thing with the buttons. You used to hit the button and it was pointing right, but I can definitely tell that if a blind person walked up there, they wouldn't be too sure what button that they were pushing.
Absolutely.
Had to make that comment.
Absolutely, Dave. I think that's it's also a great reminder that I'm going to show you all the improvements we need to make in just a moment. We don't need to make them all at once. And we have a lot of work to do, but also the standards changed in 2010. And that really also led to new expectations. So this is a long-term project. It's really just about us putting the plan in place that says, this is how we're going to decide what to remove and when to remove it.
As an old bus driver, there was no ramp, no lift, no nothing. And then we came out with lifts, which took a lot of time, and then changed to ramps, which are even better. Same thing with inside the bus. So I totally get this, but I don't want to forget that there was, at a time, a long time ago, maybe before you guys were born, but there was a time when that old stuff was a great move.
Absolutely.
It's not now, so
Absolutely.
wasn't bad. It's just
That is good.
Moving forward, yeah. So I do want to show you walk you through some of the maps of some of these elements across the city. I also want to acknowledge, as someone talking about the ADA, that these maps are not actually totally the most, I would say, inviting for someone who might struggle with visual impairment. So please definitely use the printout that you have if you want to take a closer look, and I'm happy to pause and explain anything as we go.
Yeah, what's the difference between the red and the green? And
We're going to talk about it in a second.
Okay.
Yep. You anticipated my next slide. Just right on it, Tom. So we worked with a consultant, TSI, to do an inventory of our public right-of-way across the city to identify where are the barriers currently, and of the barriers that exist, specifically for some of the things we just looked at, where are they compliant, not compliant, but maybe like close to compliant? Where are they poor? Where are they very poor? And where are they just simply non-existent? The thing that we need to have there isn't there. So the first thing that they took a look at these things all together, but the first thing we'll talk about is curb ramp compliance. So you can see in this map, they did an inventory of just under 2,000 ramps across the city. Across the city, only 24% of our ramps are in compliance with the current ADA standards. However, we zeroed in on a focus area, which is what you'll see the difference between the lighter dots on the outside and the more bright or pronounced dots. And this was decided as parts of the city that are fairly high foot traffic and near areas of interest. You can see the red is a non-compliant curb ramp, and the green is a compliant curb ramp. I'm going to go a little deeper into this, so I'll walk through some of these maps and then we'll pause. Within that, so this is a map of the same elements, but we've got some different shading happening. Specifically, rather than just saying compliant or non-compliant, they also graded them for us based on condition. So anything in green here, is a fair or better. Anything in yellow is poor. Orange is very poor. And red, which there is that one red, that picture that I showed you, it's hiding in here, but is the missing, the non-existent curb ramp. They also took a look, well, I'll show you this breakdown. So I think this is helpful to see that while of the focus area, nearly half are fair or better, still around 43% are poor or very poor. And I think that's an important thing to know, for us to know. They also looked at sidewalks. So we looked at that picture earlier of the sidewalk with the crack in the middle of it. They took an inventory of 868 segments of sidewalk. 18% are in compliance with the current ADA standards. The biggest issue are those high edges, whether it's a high edge caused by a tree root that pushes the sidewalk up, or the settling of a concrete segment that then lowers it below another segment of the sidewalk, causing a high edge. It is really hard in a city that so values its tree canopy to not have a constant fight between our sidewalks and our tree roots. They also did a little bit of a prioritization for us, again, based on the most walked around parts of the city, and based on the places where the challenge or the edge or the broken part of the sidewalk was the most extreme. So you can see here, they graded them again, a high priority, a really bad sort of uproot or high edge in the sidewalk, medium priority, and low priority. Got a couple more to go through and then I'll pause. They took a look also at our accessible on-street parking.
Can you go to the last slide? So when they're looking at priority, was it just like places where people are using the sidewalk more, or were they also including things like services, public services that they were?
Yeah, so they're looking not just at where there's some correlation between those things,
Yeah.
but yeah, they're looking at places where we know we have a lot of foot traffic because there are services there. Yeah. Parking stalls, of the 874, only 15 are painted with a symbol. So you can see again here, which ones are marked with ADA, which ones are not. And then getting back into that push button and that signaling.
So does that mean there in this city or in this area, there are 15 ADA spots, or there are 15 properly marked ADA spots, and there's 874 total ADA spots?
There are 15 properly marked. There are 874 total stalls, not necessarily.
Of ADA and other types.
Yes, that's my understanding of the report.
So how do you define public parking even?
Sure. So it's when we have parking in the public right of way that is marked. So the parking lot out there, it's on a parcel, not in the right of way. We're not looking, well, this chapter is not looking at the parking lot at Tibbetts. But in the Issaquah Highlands, where we have individual marked parking stalls, then we're looking at that.
Yeah, along the Highland Drive, right? Those parallel parking
Right.
spots.
Yep.
Okay,
And
those parallel parking.
right.
So
And
like
when-
even at Costco, that whole Costco development, none of that counts, right? Or
Like-
most of it does not.
Because
It's
that's
a
a
word.
private business site, but
Because
like
they're all private.
the library parking garage could be a public.
The library.
But not public right of
But
way.
a parking garage wouldn't be part of this survey because it's not in the public right of way.
Even though it's King County public. Okay.
So this is really.
So
On
this
the
is-
city of
You
Issaquah.
can think of it generally
It's
like
on
parallel
street.
Yes,
It's just on street, city of Issaquah parking.
right. And the way ADA's, hold on, Cynthia, I'll go to you. The way ADA is written, we don't even look at where we have on-street parking that's not marked. It's metered or marked parking.
So the back in diagonal parking in front of the P patch on Rainier, that's city public right of way, right?
Yes.
Okay. Most of them we're talking about parallel parked, like Front Street and other.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Where does 15 stand? I mean, is that a lot? Is that a little? I mean,
It's not a lot.
Yeah.
What is like the appropriate number?
I would have to get back to you on the exact appropriate number.
Yeah, because those are stalls, they're not 874, those are not designated ADA at all.
Right.
Oh,
it's
okay, I
15.
missed that. Okay.
Yeah, it's 15 that are painted with an ADA symbol, and that's not even to say that it meets ADA. It's
Yes.
just painted ADA, and I looked at what it takes to put on-street ADA parking, and it's quite a bit.
Yeah.
Okay, but the 874 is parking available,
Available on
but
street.
not necessarily ADA.
Not
It
necessarily.
wasn't designated.
That's the total survey of metered on
Cities
street
wide, okay.
marked.
But that's only city-owned property. That's not private property. The count is city-owned, doesn't have anything to do with private property.
Totally.
Right.
Example, where we live. I happen to live in an apartment complex that has ADA markings. But that's, I would believe, that's never been part of the count. That's just one tiny example. But of the ADA spaces, they named the library, salmon hatchery is another one. Those are all public. Salmon hatchery isn't belonging to the city, but that count is only city, correct? It's
City-
not private, it's not state, it's only city spaces.
City and on street. So it's not parking lots.
Got it. I have just one other quick question, and I know this may come up. What's the cost of a compliant ramp? One ramp, what's the cost?
I
of
happen to
one
know.
compliant ramp?
I came with that one in pocket. So it is about $15,000
For one compliant ramp?
for one compliant ramp. So if we were on the high side to replace or improve all of the 1,498 non-compliant ramps across the city, it would cost over nearly $26 million.
You said 1,498. When I did my calculations, 473 were compliant and 1,499 were non-compliant. So you take that 1,499 times $15,000, that's a significant chunk of change.
Is that the same number if it's improving one versus, like if there's an existing curb versus, is that the cost for basically there's no curb cut and to put one in? Because I assume that's a little higher than if you're building new.
I actually have the page open with the exact breakdown of that 15K, but I would love to get through the rest of the presentation.
Yeah, so I can make a comment, having done them in the past, is each one may vary depending on the slope of the street and the grade that you're trying to match, so that's what would be an average. Some are gonna cost a little bit more because of the grade you're trying to match, and some are gonna.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, what we really need support and understanding is, are the criteria we're using to determine which ramps we replace first, are they the right criteria? So with that in mind, I want to quickly walk through these last two maps so we can get to the discussion of the criteria. So again, just a little bit more background on where we've been. TSI also evaluated 53 intersections for us. There were 10 other intersections that were not evaluated because they are a washed-out jurisdiction. Of those 53, 9 intersections were 100% compliant when it came to pedestrian signals. 44 have one or more non-compliant feature, but I think this speaks to what Dave has mentioned, is that there are a lot of things that they're sort of compliant, like we're compliant with the old expectations, or we have one element that's there, but not all of it. So it's a work in progress. And then we have 10 have non-APS push buttons. And then last thing I'll talk about briefly, rectangular rapid flashing beacons. So that would be, I think my favorite one, which is right in front of City Hall. When you press the button, there are those little rectangles, they light up and they send an extra signal to drivers. And these exist in mid-block crossings. So the idea being someone is not necessarily expecting to stop at a mid-block. They evaluated 58 push buttons at mid-block crossings and in roundabouts. And so this is a very hard map to see, but you can see in the very tiny blue the places that we do have those mid-block RRFBs. Priorities, the prioritization criteria. Currently, the way we are thinking about this, and this has been a recommendation from our consultant, is that there are 4 main criteria that we are using to determine the priority of burial removal. The first is that the barrier has been identified. It is part of an already planned, already funded project in the CIP, or part of the pavement management plan. So we're planning on doing improvements in an area. We want to make sure that we get all of the barriers that are within that plan. Second is that they are in proximity to a likely ADA destination, or honestly just a high traffic destination. So a transit center, a grocery store or retail store, schools, libraries, the senior center is a big one that we feel like is important to have in this list. You can also see city buildings, post office, medical clinics, hospitals, pharmacies, and parks and trails. Those are the locations that we're prioritizing in terms of proximity to them.
And that's not necessarily in any order.
Once in that bullet point, no. So just the idea of proximity to one of these types of locations.
Right.
3 is the grade or condition. So we walk through the things that are poor, very poor, missing, big cracks, slightly cracked. The worse the condition, the higher we want to prioritize something. If it is a real big hazard, we want to make sure that we're removing the bigger hazards first. And then public feedback. This conversation today, the open house that we had, the public survey that went out, public comment that's happened at every meeting. And then we also have a grievance policy and procedure that people can submit through the city website, a grievance for something they feel is out of compliance. That gets us to the discussion part. So I'd be curious to hear, and I'll go back to those 4 so we can look at them. I'd love to get thoughts from this group in particular. Do these criteria make sense? Do these 4 make sense? And are there any exceptions? Any things that, just from your own experience as residents of the city of Issaquah, you're like, this is an egregious barrier that should be removed regardless of where it would land when prioritized through these 4 criteria?
Go ahead, Micah.
I like the criteria. I mean, I think that's a pretty good order. And the only thing that kind of stood out to me is if you're doing an open house and that open house is not accessible, then you may be selecting your responses based on that. But other than that, it seems a pretty logical way to go about it.
We very intentionally had our open house at Pickering Barn because it was the most accessible building, and had it as hybrid so that people that might have struggled with mobility getting there could join virtually as well. So yeah, hear you on that.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's pretty logical layout as far as the priority.
Awesome.
To address the needs.
Sure, you're gonna say something.
Oh, did you ever consider, I know you mentioned the senior center, but what about all those facilities that house seniors, like assisted living facilities and that issue? I think that would be a priority for those.
Is that captured in the care facilities?
Oh, is it? Senior center care, maybe. You said one senior center and then I missed the care.
I heard both of us tippity typing, or John was typing and I was writing. So I'll make sure that gets added in and clarified, whether senior center care facilities, assisted living feels like an important delineation there. Yeah.
I'm super interested in, I think it looks great. And number 1 and number 2, I guess, okay, I have a couple things. With the first priority, I do think if there's something particularly egregious and it's on the CIP, and I'm assuming you mean the 6-year, not the longer one, but if something, I obviously there's a lot of good reason to wait until the project is completely redone and not, have to change again. But if it's particularly egregious, it's particularly high priority, and it's way low on the 6-year CIP, I would think maybe it could get elevated, if it were important. I'm also really, really interested in this idea of like a grievance, or like how reliable is that information? Are the people who need it the most just typically not able to figure out who to talk to and where to talk? Because I would think if somebody's got a particular morning routine and that's the one thing, and you're hearing about it, like I don't know what percentage of our users, I know this is about making sure everybody has access and it's not about how many, but I am curious how well represent, how their voice is, how much opportunity they have to voice, and whether that's reliable or is it not very reliable. Because I would think if people are having individual experiences, that would really move things up in my mind. Mm-hmm. Unless you think that it's just so not representative that it's not for all the people who just aren't making those comments but desperately need the same service.
If I paraphrase that, you're saying one person complained 10 times or 10 people complaining about the same.
Yes, but I'm also saying there may be 99 people that just have the same need, but we just don't hear from them. That's what I'm wondering, like how reliable those individual grievances, as you call them, but it seems to me the people using the system are the ones we need to listen to the most. Absolutely. Unless that voice is just so not representative.
Absolutely.
Does that?
It makes sense. I think what I hear you saying is like there's a little bit of like an equity question in terms of who's being heard, who right. knows how to voice the challenges they're facing. One thing that we've done recently, this is actually on the programmatic side, but I think addresses this, which is we added a category to See, Click, Fix for ADA concerns. It came as feedback actually at the open house that, hey, it would be great when I'm out walking with my parent, and if we come across a high edge or we come across some sort of barrier, if we can just take a picture of where it is and submit it to the city directly. And so that's hopefully going to become another avenue for people to share. But I do think one of my questions is also how aware are people that we have those tools also for them to use. I think there's some questions around how we can get the information out that we're listening. We'd like to crowdsource more of the higher priority or higher incidents.
I guess what I'm saying is the people using the system and finding it, finding the barriers and literally facing the barriers are the ones that voice is super important.
Yeah.
But it also just makes me wonder if there's many that it may not be a good enough criteria by itself, because there may be, for everyone who voices, it might be 100 that don't have a chance to. But anyway, that was kind of the only thing that I wanted to say. Yes, thank you.
I'm going to be nitpicky. Public feedback. I would move that public comment / complaint up to the first bullet under public feedback. I was privy one day, just came out of the barber shop in the caboose, when Maurice had the caboose. My wife was walking from across the street, had to go down because we didn't have a crosswalk at that light then. Yeah. That was a few years ago. And you had to cross in the middle of the block. Yeah. And I saw her and I waved, and as soon as I waved, there was a sidewalk like this, and she just went, bam. I jumped in the car. I didn't want to call an ambulance or run across the street, drove around, put the four-ways on, and sure enough, she had to go to the hospital. And I took her right there. That complaint should have immediate, somebody in Public Works the next day should go over and look at that sidewalk and go, you're right, we need to sign this thing and move it up on when we fix it. Because it was not horrid, but that was a barrier. Yeah. Other people would have fallen. It wasn't just my wife. So that's why I say public comment / complaint needs to move that up.
I wasn't sure if that was something else or if it belonged on this list of 4, the individual grievance or complaint or incident.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, right now it fits within 4. I do think, however, the thing with a grievance, a formally submitted grievance, is the city is required to take certain actions pretty quickly. So once someone submits a grievance, we have 15 days by which to arrange a conversation with them, provide answers for them, and if they're unsatisfied with that, another 15 days before the city administrator has to arrange a conversation with them. We sit down and meet with them. I think there's also just a challenge on people knowing that there's a process for that too, which is, so I think it fits within that, but once you submit a grievance, it actually becomes much more of a legal issue from the start. So.
Or it becomes a lawsuit.
So that's not really included in
Right.
this list, is what you're saying.
I see.
It is and isn't. Like, I think if people have submitted concerns before, we're taking that into account. But once you submit a legal grievance, we actually have to take particular legal steps. Actually, it doesn't lead to it actually doesn't legally bind the city to address that item. They just have to clarify the plan for it.
You mean clarify if there's a grievance? I guess I'm missing something somewhere.
You're totally not. It is something I learned about this week when someone submitted their first grievance, and I had to go find out if the trail going off of the new trail that's happening up in West Highlands is ADA compliant or not. And it turns out trails aren't actually covered in the ADA. It's the ABA, and it's a whole different set of. So the grievance process, it's a legal process. So this is criteria that we're using to determine, hey, what are the things that what are we going to replace first? What are the barriers we're going to remove first? So if people have submitted grievances as part of a public comment or a complaint, that's a thing that we're going to take into account when we're prioritizing barriers for removal. Submitting a grievance does not require the city to actually fix whatever the issue is.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
Since our role here is to give feedback on this project, if under number 4, you include some kind of language that captures, it's kind of ironic because if you submit a grievance, it may or may not make it into the plan. You just have to, there's ways to address the plan. One thing that might capture this is known repetitive hazard areas. And however it becomes known is either through grievances, through just emails, through running into John at the store, like known established grievances, because I feel like online service, open house, public comment to me implies a formal, meeting. And I think if we could add that, it's kind of a receptacle, a bucket to put that, to make sure we collect that.
Yeah, I would think something like that would fit under 3, where you're talking about like compliance with
Yeah.
enforcement conditions.
Yeah.
As far as it's known.
But that's from the analysis. I'm talking about things that people are, I'm very interested in this idea of specific people using the system and their feedback. And I just want to make sure that's captured.
But that's, I think, I may be wrong, but I think we're talking about 2 things. One is giving a complaint about something, and this is talking about how we're going to fix it. So the complaints are all coming in. This is part is how
This
we're
is the
going to address
prioritization. And I'm saying if there's a lot of complaints, whether they're formal and legal and, come through that system, or whether it's something you ran into him and he said he just took his wife to the hospital, like known incidents. And I think that my only issue with, I don't think it's in 3 because I would assume 3 is more of an analysis done by a consultant that's not exactly living and breathing and, living and being updated. It's more of just the
more
known.
public feedback, because when somebody has an accident or sees a problem, they let the city know, and therefore that's part of public feedback. Yes. Right?
Yeah, I'm just trying to be more specific about more, a 5th way to know that isn't one of the 4 bullet points.
So you're saying it's a grievance.
I'm
You know,
saying it's
let somebody-
firsthand knowledge of a specific, it's firsthand knowledge of a specific
It could be a
problem.
grievance or a known issue, and I think,
Anyway, it comes into the city's,
and so how would you take that to fit it into the prioritization?
I'm saying if you keep getting the same ones, then that should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but Micah, you had something else?
I was just gonna say that I think if you're getting a lot of comments, it should also force, this doesn't need to be on this, but it should force a reevaluation of where it's being prioritized, right? Because if you're getting a lot of comments, it's probably actually in proximity to something that you're not thinking of.
That's a good point.
So maybe it's just a matter of when you're getting that, you need to go reevaluate where it is prioritized. Because I mean, it seems like if people are going over it, then it should be proximity would be the priority it falls under.
Or it's in poor condition.
Or it's in poor condition, yeah.
So I've got a question. Dave, you can.
This is quick.
Yeah.
So, like last month, this is what you're asking. Is this good? I say it's great. Well, it can even be better, but it's great. Do it. It's perfect. It's gonna get us there. You might juggle that stuff around in the center there, but I think this is a good way to make sure we're prioritizing the barriers and getting them removed. And truthfully, I think the complaints will do it one way or the other. You'll either fix them because there's a complaint, or a lawyer will be visiting you with papers. And but I think I'm looking at 650 here, and I'm saying, yep,
You mean both?
that's what you want.
Yep.
Great. We'll do the minutia in the middle, but I think that's great. That's what I want.
Do you guys all agree?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so as the person who's going to implement
Yes.
this, I have a question. Now, it's one thing for a tripping hazard because besides the ADA violation, there is the broken wrist and the cling. And so that's pretty, I want to put that in its own category. In the time I've been with the city, we've never once gotten a complaint that we haven't a curb ramp that does not meet standard or a pedestrian push button that does not meet standard. But I want to play through the hypothetical of we get one complaint and it's someone with a mobility disability, just hypothetical, and that is on their route and it doesn't fit under the category of number 2 and it's not on a project. As an advisory board, and I've got an opinion on what I would want to do, but I want your opinion. Should that one move up, knowing that there is someone with a disability who's actually using that route?
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
And I would say yes.
And
Yes.
I get that, and I say, yes, it should move up.
Right.
The severity of it will make it move up.
How do we describe that though in writing so it's clear?
So the counter view to that, I think that, and this is why I said should require reevaluation. I don't think it should automatically move up because what I don't want to happen if we just look outside of the city of Issaquah. Typically, cities hear, governments hear from a very small group of people, get any topic, right? And so what I wouldn't want to have happen is we are out prioritizing things that have a larger impact because we have one voice, right? That may actually be a really impactful one. And so that's where I think that it should be a reevaluate, not a jump, just go straight to jump the line. The outcome could be the same, right? You may go, yeah, this has proximity to something we didn't think about. But I just don't want to turn this into okay, well, we have our whole plan, because it was going to cost more if you reorder stuff around.
Yeah, and that could be just one place and somebody, someone who is somewhat immobile, where they live perhaps. It's one individual sidewalk and not as many people use it.
The tricky part of it is ADA is not about, cost efficiency per user the way you might, it's about making sure it's being inclusive. So I think it's tricky. I do think that I could live with your suggestion, which is reevaluate and maybe, you could spend a fortune redoing something and that person could move in the next month. So I do think that reevaluate is probably appropriate, but that was kind of what I was getting at is your question. And I'm seeing a lot of nodding about reevaluate, and I also know we're starting to fall behind. Does anyone have anything else to add that you think will take it in a different direction? And do you have any questions? Do you have any questions that you think we haven't gotten to?
Did we give
You did.
her what she needs.
I have exactly what I need. What I'm going to suggest is the second portion that I was going to talk about tonight. I actually want to come back to tab to talk about.
I wonder if we can have a 5-minute thing, because I think we probably all have a couple of ideas. And then we're just going to squeeze Thomas just a little bit.
Okay.
I don't have a chair board tonight. Is that okay?
That's totally fine.
It might be easy.
If you have some quick ideas, that will be great, and I will still probably come back
Okay.
but I would love to get input on the front end around public reporting if you have thoughts. But Mikey, you might have something before we move to that.
Well, I mean, I was just gonna say, I don't have anything on that because I feel like I'm not qualified to help you with that. I think you need to go and talk to people who you're not reaching, which is obviously a challenge. But I mean, I can go and view something on the website and not everyone can. So how can I can't advise, I don't know how to.
Which is totally fair. I think that this is always the tension in coming and asking for a brainstorm of ideas versus give me feedback on a plan I already have. Is I'm not really asking you to advise so much as be a co-conspirator on the idea side of things. And so I think that's totally fair. And I'm also happy to take 2 minutes and get any quick thoughts, but I'm also happy to come back at a later date. So.
I read this question as I was preparing, and I think it's always really, really hard. And I think that we should put an appropriate amount of energy into this. I don't think anyone ever feels like they've nailed it on these things. But I did have one I think your point is well taken, Mike. I mean, I think it's not really our area of expertise to figure that out, but it is really, it's really challenging. And I think there's no way to do it great. It's just never, you would have to put so much resources into it. But it did occur to me that on site, if there was sort of signage that was, I don't want to call it marketing, but something that's not, there's something that's just promoting and giving people a moment to stop and think, and maybe a QR code if you want to look at the plan. But the first time I heard one of those things saying Southeast 56 crossing now, I'm like, what is that? And I was a little just taken aback. So maybe some kind of, every now and again you have that, like, I see this word on the street or whatever, just something so that people in the moment, and it's going to be pretty anecdotal. It'll just be kind of, it's not going to get a tremendous amount of reach, but might be kind of interesting to put it at certain key locations. And if you can find something that looks okay and can weather the, rain, it would be kind of nice for people who are using the system to build some awareness.
Yeah, and people that might not have awareness of other mobility issues.
You've ever wondered why this thing makes noise?
I mean, learning about those yellow rumble strips, everything I've learned about them in the last 6 months, amazing.
But if you want to come back, you can, but I don't know that we're going to be an awesome resource. I think it's just a challenge, and I bet every single thing any city ever tries to do to get their citizens engaged, it's hard to do it really well.
Totally fair.
I think
Totally
this is
fair.
a good question to take to that.
Great.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Because when I was reading this at a time, I was thinking, oh, color coded map, and then you were like, pointed out that, you're colorblind, that may not be a good option. I was like, oh my God, I'm an idiot, right? So it's like, I can't help with what I don't know.
Yep.
But I think that we have a board that has
And
done
then
a
human
lot of work.
services also, equity and human services.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Well, I am calling it here then.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, just in case you're interested in watching this as it progresses, we've got the final drafting coming up in the coming month. I will go to council committee in September, and then hopefully to full council for approval at the end of October. Don't be strangers, and there is, as we talked about today.
We could be at your council committee.
Absolutely.
In case the question came up, what did we think?
Awesome. It was a pleasure being here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Quick comment. Today is the 33rd anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Really?
Yeah.
It was an appropriate day to be here. Glad we got to quorum.
How fitting.
Yeah, me too.
For you folks that are younger, what I would tell you, watching it in transportation over the years, how things change, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. It's amazing where we are at today. Mine was transportation with buses and how it used to be I go way back to the 50s when I first started driving buses, and I retired in 2015. Those ADA changes that I saw over those years is significant. And the training that went in and the money, just the ramps is fascinating to me and watching that change. Anyway.
So I appreciate that. So I can use this to tease my brother who's actually turning 70 today, so.
It's as old as the ADA. Awesome. Well, thank you all.
All right, thank you. With that, there's no further ado. We'll turn it over to Thomas. Talk about our introduction to planning for Link Light Rail.
Thank you. I'm going to rely on John to present for me. I have my notes here that I am bound to, so he's going to move through the slides and I will just talk about it. But feel free to ask any questions as I go through. Next slide, please. So the purpose today is really to provide a background on linked light rails so that we are prepared for future discussions over the next couple years. The city will be developing some plans and programs that are related to linked light rail, so this is really just like the foundational information for that. To begin our discussion, I'll just provide a background on how the city has been preparing for light rail. I'll talk about some regional planning that has been done. I will touch on ST3, the Sound Transit 3 ballot initiative from 2016. Some of you were here, I'm sure, and voted on that ballot measure. I'll talk about the light rail extension, which is part of ST3, so the Kirkland to Issaquah light rail station that will be sort of relative to that. I'll talk about the ways that the city can positively influence this project, and I'll talk about next steps. So this is just some very background information that I think will be helpful for future discussions. So first, I'll be introducing the idea of a regional growth center. So this is related to the vision, the long-range vision for the region. This encompasses King, Kitsap, Pierce, and Snohomish counties. So within our region, there's a long-range plan looking out all the way to 2050. So really, really long range. It's expected that there will be a lot of growth in this region. Relative to 2018, we're expecting a 42% increase in population and a 36% increase in jobs. So a lot of
that's in the region.
That's in the region. Yep. Yeah. So I am part of that. I used to live in California. Now I live here. So that's just sort of an example of the regional growth that's happening in Seattle. And so understanding that there is a lot of growth that is happening in the next 30 years, one of the core strategies regionally is to consolidate that growth into regional growth centers. So the idea is that regional growth centers are more dense than the other areas, and they will be very urban and will be served by high-capacity transit. So transit is really there to support the density of jobs, houses, services that are available in the regional growth center area. And across the region, there's many. I think there's like 39 established regional growth centers, RGCs, and Central Issaquah is the Issaquah Regional Growth Center. So that is just some background information on how the region is managing its growth to make sure that we can accommodate the growth in a very measured way. So the city has been proactively planning for this growth for decades. This is a map of central Issaquah, and that green area is the regional growth center. And so the city is making sure that growth is accommodated and encouraged in a way that is reflective of the community's vision and goals. And so we are aligned with the region. We also have our own views on how things should go. And so in 2012, the city adopted the Central Issaquah Plan, which establishes a vision long-term for the growth of this neighborhood. The vision is essentially a livable, sustainable, balanced, and mixed-use urban area. So that's 2012. Shortly after adoption in 2015, the city partnered with PSRC, who is the regional metropolitan planning organization that helps create that long-range vision for the region. The city partnered with PSRC to get this green area designated as a urban regional growth center. So this is all just foundational knowledge to say that in Issaquah, we want a significant amount of growth to happen in that region and primarily in that region. So we're funneling our growth in that area. I can give you numbers for that. 78% of population growth citywide and 64% of jobs we're hoping to put in that area. Between 2018 and 2050, that's the number. So next slide, please, thanks. So that's just where we're at. So we're now at 2016. So kind of continuing this discussion through time of how the city's been planning for growth. So in 2016, many of you were here, a ballot measure was approved, which provides funding for the expansion of the regional mass transit system that we have here. This also includes the project that we have been sort of alluding to throughout the transit study, the Line 4 project, which is the South Kirkland to Issaquah Link Light Rail line, is part of that package. It was approved in 2016, and it is ST3 has been funneling money towards other improvements that have been happening around the region. So Issaquah's designation as a regional growth center within central Issaquah, that really positioned Issaquah to receive light rail that we will be receiving in the 2040s. So the designation helped the city get on long-range regional plans. Being on the plans enabled it to be a candidate within Sound Transit 3. It was approved, and now we're basically where we're at today. And we are now able to talk about how we can bring this high capacity transit to Issaquah. Next slide, please. And this is that map of the 4-line that we can expect in the 2040s. And it starts out in South Kirkland, goes through Bellevue, out towards Eastgate, and then out to Central Issaquah. Next slide. And this is the project phasing that Sound Transit uses. So this is sort of as we're looking long term towards where this project will go, we can sort of use this as a template for creating a strategy moving forward. So to the right here, we can see start of service. And this is all, I will preface these are assumptions that the city is making. We haven't received any formal timelines from Sound Transit, but because we're being proactive here with trying to create a strategy for the city, this is sort of what we're looking at. This is like how a typical project would go, and from this we can sort of estimate a strategy moving forward. So as we can see, 2041 is the year that Sound Transit is hoping to provide service. It's possible that the service could be delayed a couple years, all the way out to 2044 potentially, depending on if funding assumptions change from when it was approved in 2016. But working our way backwards towards, and you can see on the slide, there's some time associated with each step. So accounting for testing and operations, construction, final design, and planning, we're essentially looking at a potential 2027 start time for planning. So that is actually coming up pretty soon, and there's a lot of things that the city can do to impact how this plays out. So we are in a good position now to start talking about that, so that we're ready for those conversations in as early as 2027. So next slide. Yeah, thanks. So sort of talking about ways that the city can take advantage of this timing. We have 5 ideas on how we can positively influence the project. These are ideas that were developed via consultant interviews with peer cities that are currently working through the Sound Transit process. These were also developed using knowledge from other cities across the country that follow a same funding structure. And so these are 5 ideas that we have that I was just going to share for background information as we think about how the city can start to create a vision and goals for a light rail station area. So the first one was just developing that vision and goals, and then making sure that we can stick with that. So we want to make sure that the vision and goals that we create is developed with the community. It's not something that we're just going to develop in a vacuum. So we want to get some good feedback on that. The vision and goals should then sort of steer the ship, if that makes sense. So we want to make sure that it's not anybody but the community that is deciding like how light rail should be provided to the city. Developing the station locations and alignments should be aligned with those goals, right? So if we have a goal of something, we want to make sure that the way that service is provided and the way that the rail line is getting here is going to be aligned with community values. Other things we can do is developing strong partnerships with Sound Transit to make sure that the project runs efficiently. There's a lot of permitting that happens through the city, so making sure that city processes, and then there's some interagency sort of partnerships that can be developed. It's going to be really important. Project monitoring, that's just with any sort of project management, you want to make sure that there's ongoing communications and that there's some efficiencies that can be made. And then lastly, wanted to touch on the idea of a transit supportive land use policy. Next slide, please. And so sort of talking about like what that is, when we think about being transit supportive, these are things that we can, that the city can do, given that we're not providing transit service. These are some things that we can do to help enable light rail to meet those visions and goals. Some of the hallmarks of a transit supportive community are really about providing the density. So that's, you know, if you can read those words up there, these are sort of like buzzwords that sort of encapsulate most of the ideas of what it means to be a transit-supported station area. So a light rail station is really connecting a major destination, right? So the fact that it's been planned for central Issaquah makes sense because that's where the density is. Light rail is obviously expensive to implement, but if you're connecting a dense area with other dense areas, that sort of creates that efficiency there. Within the station area, so we're on the second D, the distance is typically a walkable sort of area. So it's really, really important that pedestrians and other non-motorized vehicles can like easily access the station area. The design is also supposed to be, you know, really walkable and really comfortable if you're just getting off light rail or, you know, approaching it. The fourth D here is the building form and massing. So, you know, you need the density to support having other uses in the area. You want to make it attractive for people to actually be in that area. There's a diversity of uses. So within the station area, you know, we can think of a lot of, you know, restaurants or like places to work or places to live, like a lot of different diversity of housing, just like a lot of options. And then the last D is demand management. And we can think of that as ways to support transit and maybe discourage other non-essential trips that are using a car. So within the context of where you're at, just keeping that into consideration within the design. So this is all just some background information to consider as we go through the visioning exercises in the future. So go to the next slide, please. So just wanted to provide that background information to keep in your back pocket as we consider visioning and goals for the light rail station. At the next TAB meeting, I'll be presenting some approaches that we are thinking about as we develop the community's vision and goals. But we really see the visioning process as being the first step of many, understanding that the vision and goals should ultimately dictate everything from light rail station location, how the line is going to be positioned as it comes to the community, all the land use policies that would sort of be facilitating of the light rail station. So really the vision and goals is sort of the high level information that will help get us to the point where Sound Transit is ready to talk about the alternatives analysis, and the city should have a preferred alignment and station location that is developed based on the vision and goals. So that pretty much concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have.
Go ahead.
So let's make it a community vision and goals for this light rail station, and that's going to be the discussion for another presentation or more information or discussion next session.
Yeah, so what I'm hoping to get from the next TAB meeting is bounce some ideas off of this group. You know, understanding that a community-led process of developing vision and goals, it should be pretty wide beyond the TAB, maybe other boards and commissions, getting some good feedback, because this is a pretty big project. It's going to change a lot of things, so we need to get some good feedback. So I'm hoping to approach the TAB at the next meeting, provide some ideas of how we think we could approach developing that vision and goals, and seeing if you have any feedback to help us improve that idea.
I have a question. Approximately when do you think the alignment question
would need to be, or ideally need to be answered?
So our best guess is that as early as 2027 and probably as late as 33, that will be the time in the planning phase that Sound Transit. It's a very squiggly timeline. We just don't have enough information. But it's better to be prepared if it comes earlier.
It seems I could think of all kinds of reasons why we would want to know where we want to have input, and then we'd want to start laying the framework, the land use, just street network, all those things, start building those in.
Right.
It seems like it makes sense.
Right. And I'll preface, I'll go back to what I just said. That is when the process would start for alternatives analysis.
Oh.
And
It might start in 10 years.
In
So in
2027.
27, that's when the alternatives analysis would potentially begin, as early as that. It could be later, depending on if there's funding, sort of structures that need to be adjusted.
Access to raise.
So what are they
Sure,
looking at
yeah.
for construction? What's the,
2041?
41?
Yeah, so
The construction would be like in the mid to late 30s.
I'll be 97 years of age. I wonder if I really should give a rat's behind.
that's a fair
That's a
thing
yes.
that I've heard. Yeah, you can think of it as being helpful for others.
Well,
Oh, come on.
this has got nothing to do with the alignment, but the development, as you probably don't know, I drove for King County Metro. And prior to King County Metro, there was a company called Metropolitan Transit. So I drove for Metropolitan Transit, got drafted when the Army came back, went back to work for King County Metro, and then retired. I've seen all kinds of development. My major concern right now is safety and security of individual users of the transit system. I'm very, very, very concerned about that. And this is not something we should be talking about later. This is something we need to be talking about up front. And then the things that come into the development. ST3 was moving along fine. And we had this thing called a pandemic. And we had some misdesigned stuff on the floating bridge, which set it way back. So pardon me, Sam, do I really want to worry about this at 97 years of age? Well, maybe. My good friend Dick Nelms flew B-17s in World War II. He's 100, and I take him into the museum tomorrow morning. So, yeah, maybe.
You'll be around.
Yeah, so I look forward to watching it develop. I'm just hoping that I can ride to South Bellevue and beyond, all the way to Redmond on the new one that's being planned for. That's right there in the near future. And I'm knocking on wood, will I be able to ride on. Anyway, enough from me. I look forward to it. I thank you for coming out today and giving us this tidbit. That's great.
I have a couple things to do.
I concur with basically everything that Dave said. I think if Sound Transit is not going to take the safety of people who are on rapid transit to take rapid transit, then I don't even want this. I mean, it's not up to me, but I don't even want it coming to Issaquah, right? If they will, I think it's awesome. It's a great benefit to the community. I don't know how much say the city even has in that, but not that long ago, my brother was taking mass transit and someone was smoking something that wasn't a cigarette which is already would be a problem. And no one did anything about it. No one does anything about it. He didn't want to tell me the story because he knew I was going to say, I told you so. But, that part is concerning to me. I also, we say 2044, given the history of everything, I'm thinking it's going to be 2050 plus. On the other hand, what you're talking about, I think is awesome to talk about early, because these changes take a lot of time. So the more time we have to think about, like, okay, the station's going to be here, how do we want to design, all of our intent around the community in that location? So I think actually now is the time to talk about it. I think we'll probably talk about it once a year for the next 30 years.
I just want to add a comment that I think the transit coming to Issaquah is not just a community. I mean, transit is the region. North Bend, Snoqualmie, Issaquah station is going to be serving all of them. So it's a whole regional benefit that we're going to.
That's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the things that, and this isn't, I'm just going to toss it out there, and I know this isn't the time to discuss it, but I'm really, really interested in a parking situation, because I think that it was going to be an entirely different beast if there's no parking. And I actually think it should have no parking, because you're going to create the vision that you just described if you don't have acres and acres and acres of parking. And I remember studying some of this in graduate school about the kinds of stations that have, what happens near the station when you have a gigantic parking facility and what doesn't have, that. But how do we make it a regional asset without locating that parking? Yeah, transit. Yeah.
Destination parking.
I think park and rides are such great, tempting, short-term ways to get people to take that, and yet they just feel like they can just destroy the immediate area. So super big puzzle. And I think that it's something that's I don't know where the discussion is, but I remember reading earlier documents that already had a 500 stall parking, and I was like, wait a minute, who decided that? So for the light rail station, yeah, for this station, yeah. And
Can I continue on that train of thought?
can I just finish my, I had a couple other points I wanted to ask. One thing is, I think it'd be really important to talk about not just getting vision from the community, but I think with this kind of long range, I think we really need to be, there is a part of it where we're showing what it can be. Not what it has to be, it's not top down, but what it can be. And I think that's a place to invest in some really great messaging and some great ways to describe it, because I think it's really hard to wrap your head around. And I also think it's important to make sure that people know that this growth is coming, whether we plan for it or not. And I think some people tend to get a little bit caught up in the idea of growth being something that somebody's steering, as opposed to like, this is happening. We live in a country where you can move, you can pick up and move, and people can develop their property. So this growth is coming. And then I just wanted to say one other thing is, what is a floating zone in the slide, in the memo? What are the attachments that a floating zone?
Yeah, so that is zoning that is not like locked in on a map. The criteria has to be met for it to be applicable. That makes sense.
Is that context sensitive?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so we can talk about like this theoretical zone, and then we would apply it based off of like the context. Yeah. So you're describing like what you want, and then like that area of the city, it would be a portion of central Issaquah. If the light rail station is in central Issaquah, that is a theoretical example that could be done. It's not to say that it will be done or it should be done. That is a pretty common example of like a station location specific zoning area that has criteria that is transit supportive and sort of it's the land use component that supports the transportation component.
You had something you wanted to say?
Yeah, just real quick, staff needs to help me. Is the park and ride here still floor 3 and floor 4 didn't go. It was vacant after we got into the pandemic. We built that. That was from the time that was built to the time it was fully occupied, all the way up to the 4th floor, was less than 2 years. And that was pre-pandemic. And during the pandemic, they closed the 3rd and 4th floor. I don't think the 3rd and 4th floor is open yet. Because I know the skateboarders are using it as a rain-free skating. Okay.
Is it?
I'm gonna have to phone a friend because I take the bus in, so I don't specifically know for the 4th floor. I was there this morning and there were a decent amount of cars in there.
On the top, all the way up.
I don't know specifically.
The reason I say that, in 2015, when I was still driving the 214, which is going on holiday again, okay? In 2015, that parking lot was filled to the 4th floor. And people parking around the area because they couldn't get in. It's not that way now. I know it'll come back. I know it will come back.
14 was the bus I took in every day to.
Yeah. It's just stuff we're going through that we have to use as historical approach to what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Both you and Cynthia made a really good point about the regional connectivity versus sort of the dense urban feel and sort of understanding what the give and take is for that. That's going to be part of that visioning process. Is you have people coming from the east wanting to connect to a regional system. People are going to want to drive because I think only the 208 goes out to North Bend right now.
Yep.
So it's really, balancing like, okay, where are they going to park? Is it here or is it further down the line?
I lived in Boston, the Orange Line had one of the stops came out and you got off and you went downstairs and it's about 15 buses and they were all on the bus routes. And that was the main thing, the bus, or the train from that spot, the regional bus would take out all that.
Well,
Something like this at Issaquah would be something similar.
When they opens the South Bellevue parking, right, the 554 goes away. It won't go into Seattle anymore.
Yeah.
It'll go to South Bellevue Park and Ride. It'll dump there and they'll ride the train in. Several of those, so that was always the envisioned part of the plan. And
Mercer Island.
yeah, and Mercer Island Park and Ride is not gonna, they are working on that right now. They're doing some stuff on that park and ride right now.
We copy it.
Yeah, but those are trivial questions compared to the big picture, but I'm gonna stand my ground. Unless we can assure the riders of Sound Transit now and in the future is gonna be safe, and we don't need another New York subway out here. We don't need it. And we've got to speak about that now. We can't speak about that later. And I know that sounds pretty hardcore, but when you're in the middle of that, let me tell you, there's a reason that it should be talked about now, not later. For copies of this sermon, you can write to $72 and a self-addressed envelope. Just kidding.
So it's 7:42. I think I might have time to ask this question. Dare I ask this question? So before I ask this other question, it might take, are you getting what you need? I know this is an introduction.
It was purely introduction.
Yes, so we probably got more than you wanted.
Yeah, no, this is great feedback, and like there'll be future discussions on this. The points that you made are really good points. They're things that we're thinking about. These are all considerations that we can talk about in more detail as we start thinking about like the visioning process And yeah, at the next meeting, we will really start brainstorming on like what that could look like.
I'm gonna have to bug out, I'm sorry. My apologies, my my sister just went into hospice. And my nephew's going a little bit crazy right now, so I want to get home and deal with that. But I do want to bring up one point before I go, which has nothing to do with Sound Transit. We talked about next month, our August meeting, that we could have some kind of a celebration, picnic, whatever, something where we're just not, where we get a chance to say hey to each other as human beings and Issaquahites. And so I mentioned that last month, John, you weren't here, but I did mention that could we do that again, since we're meeting back in this building. So I just wanted to make sure that was brought up for the good of the order. I appreciate that. So
Would you like to do something beforehand, like 5 to 6?
yeah, we could do something, you know, just share a potluck, just so sit with, but I may be the only one talking about this. Maybe there's nobody else interested.
Sounds lovely.
But I thought it would be something fun so that,
And we can talk about before or after, because I know people work. We don't want to, 5 o'clock is probably a commute hour, so we can talk about before or after probably as well.
yeah, it was just a thought that it's a nice time in the year to be able to do that before we get into the crappy winter months where we can't ride our bicycles over here and just enjoy each other's company. I don't think I've seen us do that since I've been on tab. I just thought I'd raise that as a, put it out there. So, and I appreciate all of that.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I gotta go home and deal with some heavy stuff now, so that Sound Transit stuff wasn't heavy.
Thank you, Dave.
Yep,
Drive safely.
Thanks, Dave.
thanks. Maybe we'll ride next month. See ya.
My question was for him, so table it. So I think we're ready to conclude on that topic, it sounds like. And anything else? Okay. Let's go ahead and move along then. Thank you very much for that. I think this is really exciting for me personally. This will be right about the time when I probably won't be able to drive anymore, so that's kind of nice. Just in time.
No.
I'll still be.
But maybe
I'm glad to be
the
here.
driverless cars. So maybe
Yeah.
we're not even thinking about what 2044 is going to be like.
Well, I mean, you think 2044?
2041,
Oh, yeah.
2044.
I think I would think about 2080 too, what's going to be out there long term.
Jetpacks.
Like a year forever. 100 years,
Jetpacks,
so
yeah.
it's something
All right.
we will too.
Let's move on to 5A, the board work plan.
Let's grab that real
Let's
quick.
be burning before-
Thank you, Thomas, I appreciate it.
And I want to note, we don't technically have a quorum right now, but we're just doing staff reports, so, or report out, so I think it's okay. I'm not going to make you leave. Okay. Thank you, Cynthia. So next month, Thomas will be returning to us to talk about light rail again, and we'll get into those more specific discussion questions that he'll have for us. September, I will be bringing traffic calling program to you all, which I'm hard at work on at the moment. And then October, we don't have anything specific planned yet. I'm still asking around to see if anyone has anything. I've checked cancel calendar and M&I calendar, and I don't see a whole lot there yet that might need to come forward, but I'll keep asking around. I'll let you know next month. And that concludes the work plan.
Thank you. Do you have a staff report?
do. Just a short one here. Just wanted to touch base about MetroConnect. Obviously, I sent out the note to you all. And of course, noted the meeting minutes. So at this moment, the staff is planning on moving forward to council next month. Building and Infrastructure specifically discussed how grateful they were for all of your discussion and feedback. All of them watched last month's TAB meeting and really appreciated the questions that were brought forward. And they did use them to highly scrutinize our proposal. I even considered just like queuing it up and having you watch the thank you, because they said it multiple times. Thank you for all the questions that you all brought up. So they recommended the proposal move forward to council for discussion and the question of approval on August 7th. So at this point, I'm still planning on doing that, but have noted your concerns about the minutes. So, and that's all I have for staff report.
Great. I don't have a chair report, and we don't have a youth. We don't have a youth report. We need some more young people around here. Is there any other business or announcements?
No, not this time.
Once, going twice. Sounds like we're adjourned. Good job, guys. Well, Dave didn't miss much.